There is a weight pressing down on your shoulders that you cannot see. A crushing silence that exists only when hundreds of feet of solid volcanic rock separate you from the sky. In the heart of Turkey's central Anatolia, the ground beneath the fairy chimneys of Cappadocia isn't just earth. It is a hollowed-out honeycomb of secrets. Beneath the feet of unsuspecting tourists lies a labyrinth so vast and so deep that it defies the logic of ancient engineering. We are told these were temporary refuges for early Christians fleeing persecution, but the architecture of the deep suggests a far more terrifying reality. This was not a hiding spot for a few weeks of winter. This was a permanent civilization built in total darkness, a desperate attempt to survive something that made the surface of the planet uninhabitable. The story begins not with a shovel, but with a hammer. In 1963, a man in the province of Nevşehir was renovating his home when he knocked down a wall in his basement. He didn't find a hidden room or a crawl space. He found an opening into an abyss. He stepped through the rubble and discovered a tunnel that led into the darkness, a stone-carved artery that plunged deeper than the foundations of modern skyscrapers. This was the entrance to Derinkuyu, an underground city reaching 18 levels into the earth, capable of housing 20,000 people along with their livestock, their food supplies, and their dead. It was an entire society that turned its back on the sun, choosing instead the cold, damp embrace of the rock. As he walked, his flashlight beam likely died against the sheer density of the gloom, revealing a world where the very concept of up and down began to lose its meaning. Think of the sheer logistics of such an undertaking. To carve 18 stories into soft volcanic tuff requires more than just primitive tools. It requires an advanced understanding of ventilation, structural integrity, and waste management. If these tunnels had collapsed, they would have become a mass grave for thousands. Yet, the air remains fresh even at the lowest levels, cycled through 52 massive ventilation shafts that look like bottomless wells from the surface. The tunnels are narrow, winding, and intentionally confusing, designed to funnel intruders into kill zones. This was a fortress, but it was a fortress built against a threat that felt absolute. If the enemy were merely a neighboring tribe or a passing army, a simple wall would suffice. You do not move 20,000 people and their cattle hundreds of feet underground to hide from a group of men on horseback. You go this deep because the surface itself has become the enemy. The most chilling feature of these underground cities is the door system. Massive, circular stone wheels, weighing up to 1,000 pounds, sit in recessed niches along the tunnels. They are designed with a central hole, not for a key, but for a spear to be thrusted through to kill anyone on the other side. But here is the detail that haunts the imagination. These doors can only be operated from the inside. Once the stone is rolled into place, the people within are sealed in a tomb of their own making. There is no way to open the door from the outside. It is a one-way isolation. Imagine the sound of that stone grinding against the floor, a heavy, final thud that signals the end of the world above. It suggests a fear so profound that the inhabitants preferred the risk of starving in the dark to the risk of whatever was roaming the horizon. They weren't just hiding, they were barricading the planet out. In the flickering light of an oil lamp, the walls of Derinkuyu seemed to pulse. Every kitchen, every stable, and every communal room was carved with a specific purpose, yet there is a clinical coldness to the design. There are no windows to the soul here, only vents to the sky. Mainstream history suggests these cities were carved by the Phrygians or the Hittites, used by Christians hiding from Roman and Arab raids. But the deeper you go, the more the timeline begins to fray. Some researchers suggest the earliest levels could date back thousands of years before the arrival of known civilizations. If we look at the world as it was 10 millennia ago, we find a planet in chaos, emerging from a cataclysmic era of climate shifts. There are hypotheses that Derinkuyu and the dozens of other underground cities in the region were built as shelters against a purge from above. Perhaps a period of intense atmospheric instability that stripped away the protection of the clouds. In this scenario, the underground cities weren't just homes. They were survival bunkers for a lost age. Imagine the psychological toll of a generation born and raised in the dim flicker of tallow, never knowing the warmth of a sunset or the scent of rain on grass. The wine presses and oil vats found in the tunnels suggest they were preparing for long-term habitation. They were waiting for the surface to become safe again. But how long does such a transition last? Years? Decades? Centuries? The presence of chapels and schools deep in the rock implies that life went on, that a culture was maintained in the gloom, all while the world above was potentially being scorched or scoured by forces we can only guess at. The silence of the rock would have been their only music, broken only by the rhythmic chanting of prayers or the lowing of hungry cattle. The mystery deepens when you realize that Derinkuyu is not an isolated phenomenon. There are over 200 such cities in Cappadocia, many of them connected by miles of tunnels that are still being mapped today. It is an entire subterranean network, a hidden map of human desperation. Why here? The volcanic rock, while soft and easy to carve, also acts as a natural insulator, maintaining a constant temperature regardless of the weather above. It is the perfect natural refrigerator. But it also provides a unique shield. If the ancient world faced a period of intense celestial instability, the people of Cappadocia were sitting in the safest place on Earth. They were sheltered not just from iron and bronze, but from the very air they once breathed. Throughout ancient mythology, there are stories of gods cleansing the earth with fire or light. In the Zoroastrian tradition, the prophet Yima was warned by the god Ahura Mazda that a terrible era was coming, one that would destroy all life. Yima was told to build a vara, an underground enclosure, to protect the best of humanity, the animals, and the seeds of all plants. For a long time, this was dismissed as mere myth. But when you stand in the cavernous halls of Derinkuyu, the vara of Yima starts to look less like a legend and more like a blueprint. The physical evidence of the city matches the mythical description of the sanctuary with startling precision. It is a place where history and nightmare intersect, where the stones themselves seem to whisper warnings that we have long forgotten how to hear. The question remains, who were they really afraid of? If the threat was human, the city's defenses seem like overkill. If the threat was environmental, the scale of the construction suggests a catastrophe of global proportions. There is a third possibility, one that sits uncomfortably in the back of the mind. The tunnels are not just protective, they are restrictive. The winding corridors are designed to disorient, and the low ceilings force an intruder to stoop, making them vulnerable. It feels like a cage as much as a castle. Could it be that the people living below were not the masters of the city, but the subjects of a system that demanded they stay hidden? Every step taken in these halls is a step away from freedom and toward a survival that feels like a prison sentence. As you descend into the lower levels, the weight of the rock above becomes a physical presence, a phantom pressure against your chest. The air grows heavy, and the sounds of the world above vanish completely. You're in a place where time has no meaning, where the cycle of day and night is replaced by the slow drip of water and the steady rhythm of breath. This is where the hypothesis of the atmospheric purge becomes most haunting. If you were a survivor of a world-ending event and you had found safety in the deep, would you ever truly feel safe again? Or would you spend every waking moment looking at the ceiling, waiting for the rock to groan, waiting for the sky to find a way in? The psychological scars of such an existence would be passed down through DNA, a permanent fear of the open horizon. Modern researchers have used ground-penetrating radar to see even deeper, and what they've found suggests that we have only scratched the surface. There are vast chambers beneath the 18th level that are flooded or blocked by cave-ins. There are tunnels that lead toward the mountains, extending for kilometers into the unknown. We are looking at a civilization that spent more effort building downward than we spend building upward. The sheer volume of rock removed, millions of tons, would have been enough to build several Great Pyramids. Yet, there is no sign of where that debris went. It is as if the excavated earth simply vanished, or was repurposed in a way we haven't yet identified. The missing earth is a silent testament to the scale of the labor, a ghost of the mountain that was moved to make room for 20,000 souls. The silence of Cappadocia is deceptive. We see the beautiful hot air balloons and the sunlight hitting the golden hills, but we are standing on a hollow shell. Every step we take on the surface echoes in a vacant hallway below. The Purge might be a forgotten memory, a trauma buried so deep in our collective consciousness that we no longer remember why we fear the dark, or why we feel a strange sense of relief when we enter a cave. The people of Derinkuyu didn't leave behind written records. They didn't leave behind names or kings or dates. They left behind a structure that screams a single word: survive. They lived in a world where the light was a death sentence and the darkness was a sanctuary, a reversal of everything we believe to be true about the human experience. If the surface of the earth was indeed being scoured by some ancient disaster, these cities would have been the only lifeboats in a sea of chaos. The sophisticated ventilation systems would have needed filters, perhaps layers of cloth or charcoal, to keep out toxic ash or dust. The wells would have needed to be protected from contamination. The deeper you look at the mechanics of these cities, the more they resemble modern fallout shelters. We like to think of ancient people as primitive, yet they solved the same problems our modern societies struggle with today. How to keep a population alive when the world ends. They didn't use computer models or reinforced concrete. They used the very bones of the earth, carving a future out of the silence of the stone. The dark thriller of Cappadocia is not just about what we have found, but what we haven't. It's about the shadows that move in the corners of the torchlight, and the realization that for thousands of years, humanity's greatest achievement was simply learning how to disappear. The Purge from the sky remains a compelling theory, a story told by the architecture itself. But as we look at our own fragile atmosphere and our own technological vulnerabilities, the tunnels of Derinkuyu feel less like a relic of the past and more like a mirror. We are walking through their kitchens and their churches today as tourists, but we are walking through a monument to a terror so great that it forced tens of thousands of people to choose a life without the sun. It is a reminder that our dominance of the surface is a privilege, not a right. When you finally climb back up the narrow stairs and emerge into the Anatolian sun, the light feels aggressive. The open sky feels exposed. You realize that for the people who lived there, the surface was the place of danger, and the darkness was the place of peace. They lived in the roots of the world, waiting for a signal to return that may have taken generations to arrive. The transition from the cool 13-degree air of the tunnels to the heat of the Turkish sun is a shock to the system. It makes you wonder how they felt when they finally emerged, if they did. Were they blinded by the light? Did they look at the sky with wonder, or with the lingering suspicion that it might turn on them again? Is it possible that history is a cycle? That the events that drove them underground were not one-time occurrences, but recurring phenomena that the ancients knew all too well? If so, Cappadocia is not just a museum. It is a waiting room. The circular stone doors are still there, ready to be rolled into place. The ventilation shafts are still clear, ready to breathe for those who hide below. The mystery of why they went underground may never be solved with absolute certainty, but the feeling you get in the deep levels, the feeling of being watched by the very rock itself, suggests that the reason is still down there, hiding in the dark, waiting for the sky to change again. We are left with a haunting image of a world where the horizon was a threat and the earth was the only savior. The labyrinth of Cappadocia stands as a silent witness to a time when humanity was pushed to its absolute limit. Whether they were hiding from armies, from gods, or from the stars themselves, they left behind a message written in stone. When the sky turns against you, the only way out is down. The tunnels are still there, cold and quiet, holding the breath of 20,000 ghosts, reminding us that the ground beneath our feet is never as solid as it seems. We walk on the roof of a hidden world, oblivious to the fact that one day, we too might find ourselves reaching for a hammer, looking for a way into the dark.